know this might be kind of a shock to all of you, but I have never been much of an athlete. I know, I just have this body by natural causes. I've been my entire life, and seemingly always shall be, a pretty big dork. That's just the way it is. Sure, I've always been taller than most everybody else around me, and believe it or not, I actually had a pretty killer jump shot, but I just never really wanted to play for the basketball team. The thing about it is I have this weird thing about me when I'm playing basketball or any other sport. When I'm playing it, I just want to have fun. Most coaches don't like that kind of mindset. They want you to win. I'm going to do my best to play my best, for sure, and if I don't play my best, I'll get upset, but I'll only get upset at myself. I don't care if I win. As long as I had a good time and I felt I did my best, we're good. Not exactly the best mindset for an athlete. So that sort of mindset actually has been around my entire life, and in high school, it led to me not doing sports. I was in band. I love band. Band was awesome. But band wasn't the only thing I did in high school. It wasn't the only extracurricular activity I was involved in my high school career. I was also a part of the drama club. I know, band and drama club. Believe it or not, my Friday nights weren't exactly bursting with girls begging to go on dates with me. Kind of crazy. But I loved drama club. I thought it was so much fun to just be able to pretend to be somebody for a little while, to get so invested into what was going on, to act in front of other people, to just be somebody else for a little while. It was a lot of fun just working together with my friends and putting on these plays for a lot of good time. I was never the starring role. I was always the supportive character who everybody remembered because I was just that good. But I did a couple of different plays. I played Dr. Einstein. No, not that one. In the play version of Arsenic and Old Lace. Dr. Einstein was a character who had a bit of a drinking problem, was a plastic surgeon for a serial killer who resembled Boris Karloff. It was a lot of fun. If you've never seen Arsenic and Old Lace, there is a movie version of it. It's a really fun story to do. But Dr. Einstein was supposed to be about 5'0", and by the time I was already in high school, I was 6'3", so I was taller than the guy who was supposed to be intimidating to me, so I made it work. We did it. It worked. I also played Virgil, a next-door neighbor who was sucked into a conspiracy to commit murder in a play called Let's Murder Marcia. It's another fun story. It's actually about a woman who overhears her husband planning a surprise birthday party, but she thinks that he's trying to kill her, so she recruits my character to try to kill him first. It's a lot of fun. I broke an antique mirror doing that one, though. Now you kind of want to know why. There was a scene that had a lot of dialogue, and my character was being sick in the hallway bathroom, and not a lot is happening on stage, so I thought it'd be hilarious if I just kind of fumbled my way out like I was doing better, and then have that moment, and then rush back. And when I did that, I bumped and knocked down a $700 antique mirror that somebody had loaned us for set dressing and broke it. I felt so good after that. But I enjoyed doing these sorts of things. It was always kind of my favorite thing to do. I wish I could tell you, though, that every play I was involved in drama club was awesome. But my senior year, my acting career, if you want to call it that, ended on a less than positive note. The decision was made that year to do a musical. I don't like musicals. I know I've just made enemies of like every woman in this room. But I've never found, it just kind of takes me out of the moment. I've never been in a situation where I felt the need to sing what I was doing or what was going on. It'd be weird, right? If all of a sudden I just did my sermon in song. Some of you'd be like, I may miss next week. But I never liked doing musicals. And the musical that was chosen was Little Shop of Horrors. I like the story of Little Shop of Horrors, I'm not going to lie. But here's the problem that we found when it came to doing Little Shop of Horrors. If you're going to do any sort of musical, but particularly one that has as wide a cast as Little Shop of Horrors, you need lots of people to be involved. And this may come as a surprise to you, but Drama Club wasn't exactly bursting with people who wanted to be a part of it. Our director at the time had hoped that maybe doing a musical and doing Little Shop of Horrors might be enough to get some kids to come and join the drama club who had not been a part of it before. And we got a couple, but not enough to fill the entire cast. And so my thought was, well, maybe we're just going to drop Little Shop and we're going to do something else. But that wasn't the decision that was made. Instead, the choice was made to have what little cast we did have, a lot of us who were in the background playing multiple roles. Not combining characters to form a new character, but to play different people entirely. Now what this meant was as we did our performances and such, I would come out there as one of these background characters, I would say whatever line it was I was supposed to say, and then I would rush backstage. I would rip off whatever costume I had on me, I'd put on the new costume as fast as I could, I'd change my hair, I'd try to come up with a new accent for the new character, and then I would come back out. It was chaos. It was difficult, and as a result of not having enough people to help do this sort of thing, it was awful. Had we have had enough help and had we had the right people in the right roles, it could have been amazing. It could have been something that was awesome. I may have changed my entire perspective on musicals because of it. But instead, my only memories are stress-filled and anxiety. It's hard enough to learn how to play just one character, but to learn how to do 2 or 3 and try to rush and do them all, it's nearly impossible. If we'd had enough people to help out, if we'd had folks in the right place at the right role, it could have been something incredible, but because we didn't, what we did have was people stretched far too thin, trying to fill the roles of multiple people. We see this sort of thing all over the place right now, especially, it seems like. You go into different restaurants and maybe they're running behind, and oftentimes right now, if they're running behind, it's probably not because they're not working hard, it's because they've not got enough staff behind them. And they're trying to make do with what they've got. People are being stretched too thin. Waitresses are taking care of far too many tables. There's 2 or 3 cooks in the back trying to cook for 120 people, and they're doing the best that they can. This past week, actually, I talked to a buddy of mine, and I shared this in my Sunday school class. So Sunday school kids, folks, I'm sorry. You're going to hear the story twice. I was talking with a buddy of mine who works in HVAC. He does HVAC repair. And I just asked him, how's it been going? And he told me, I'm busier than I've ever been in my entire life. And I asked, is it just because everybody's getting ready for spring and summer and they want the air conditioning fixed? He said, no, we don't have enough help. He told us we don't have enough people who are interested. He said, back when I got started in HVAC, it was super competitive to try to find jobs and try to get into locations. You had so many people who wanted to do it. Now, we're begging people to come join us. He said, we'll pay for their schooling, we'll pay for their education, and when they're done, they're going to make $41 an hour plus benefits. And we can't find people who want that job. Fun. Now some of you in the room just thought, you know what, HVAC repair might be my field. But there's not enough people to help out in that particular area. So they're being stretched far too thin, and they're stressed out, and they're overworked, and they're tired. This happens all over the place, even in the church. You've heard me say before that a lot of the church experts, people who survey various churches, have said that there's an 80-20 ratio, meaning that 80% of the work in the church is being done by about 20% of its people. Now a lot of those experts are saying it's more like 90-10. Some have even theorized that it's 95-5. You have people in the church who are trying to cover all the bases, who are trying to stretch themselves as thin as they possibly can in order to take care of the work. And what's most maddening about that sort of thing is that I have experienced people leaving the church before saying because they don't feel like they're being plugged in, they don't feel like they found their right spot, that they've been utilized to the best of their ability. We're made up of a diverse amount of people of different ages, different experiences, different interests, different whatever. And instead of plugging people into the right spot to be able to fill that right role, to help take some of the pressure off, to make that 80-20 a little bit more even, instead, we have people who are wonderful folks who are volunteering in multiple places because nobody else is, because nobody else is stepping up. We're not plugging in the people that we need to plug in. The people that we do have plugged in are being plugged into places that don't fit them, but they're doing their best. So you have people leaving the church because they're not being plugged in, and those people who are being stretched too thin are finding themselves overworked and dealing with burnout, and they're also wanting to leave the church. Is it any wonder why the church in America is shrinking? It's because somehow we're not finding the right dichotomy here. And yet it's not always been that way. As we've read over this particular text throughout this entire series, as we continue to look at this sort of thing, trying to dig deep into this first church to find the secret to their unity together, there's an element to this particular text that we kind of miss. And I'm going to be honest with you, I've missed this. I've read this text 100 times probably, just in preparation for this particular series, and I still missed it. It's one of those things that's so obvious, how could you possibly miss it? As we continue to look at Acts chapter 2, verses 42 through 47, we're going to look at it one more time. My wife has expressed to me that she's ready for me to move on from Acts. But we're going to look at this one more time, and I want you to see if you can spot what it is. See if you can see what's been so easy to miss. And again, if you don't see it, give yourself some grace, because I didn't see it for a long time either. Here's what it says. It says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe, and many wonders and signs were being performed through the apostles. Now all the believers were together and held all things in common. They sold their possessions and property and distributed the proceeds to all as any had need. Every day they devoted themselves to meeting together in the temple and broke bread from house to house. They ate their food with joyful and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And every day the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. Did you happen to catch it? Do you see it? Again, it's one of those things that's so easy to miss, so obvious that we should see it. And when we don't, it's frustrating. Or when somebody points it out to us, it's something that may bother you. At least that's what it did for me. Are you ready? Who's they? When Luke says the word they, who's he talking about? They is an awfully big word, is it not? They kind of conveys a fair amount of people. He's not talking about the apostles because he goes on a little further to explain what the apostles were doing. He's not talking about any one person in particular, otherwise he probably would have said them by name, because anytime he's talking about one person in particular from this point forward, he says their name. And he's not talking about a small group of people, because again, he'll say some of them. Instead, Luke says they. That implies that Luke is talking about the entire church. He goes on to use even more inclusive language, saying words like everyone. And my personal favorite big word, all. This is a church made up of individuals who are all united, who are all looking to fill a different role within the church. They are all working together. At no point in this particular passage is Luke singling out anyone, or is he talking about a small group of people. This language that he uses implies that every individual that made up this early church, and again, we are talking about at least 3,000 people, all plugged in and engaged and doing the things. They're active and contributing to the mission of this early church. They were all collectively a part of what this church was doing and what it was accomplishing. It goes even further than that. Again, in verse 45, a verse we highlighted just a couple of weeks ago, It says they sold their possessions and property and distributed the proceeds to all as any had need. But let me ask you this. Who told them to do that? This doesn't sound like anything the apostles would have said, hey, you all got to do this. Whatever possessions you got, go sell it. Because again, if a minister says that sort of thing, or a preacher of any kind says, go sell all your possessions and give it to the poor, not a lot of people are coming back. So the implication that Luke makes here, and as we see further on down in some of the verses that we highlighted later on, they just did this. They saw a need amongst their brothers and sisters, and they said, you know what, I'm not okay with this. And so they took their stuff, they did whatever they could to meet that ministry. They saw where a ministry could be done, and they did it without prompting. That's incredible. To think about seeing all these people who are around you in need and just saying, you know what, I'm going to minister to you, and this is how I'm going to be able to do it. Verse 46 says, every day they devoted themselves to meeting together in the temple, and don't miss this last part, and broke bread from house to house. This implies that there were several people who were offering to let the church gather in their home. That's not an easy thing to do, right? Because that implies that there had to be a cleanup ahead of time, right? Nobody's mom is letting anybody come over unless this house is spotless. There's going to be cleanup after everybody leaves. Somebody's going to have to take care of this. I want to remind you, too, that the church didn't have a building, so this was necessary. There was no designated, this is the church, and so they needed a place where they could gather together, and some folks said, you know what? I got a home. I got some extra square footage. We can fit some folks in here. This is where we can gather. It's a small thing, but it has big implications. It means that they believed so much in what the mission of this particular church was, they were willing to sacrifice a little bit of their own home so that the church could gather together and meet and continue to grow in its mission. And beyond that, it also implies that food was being served at a constant basis. So that means that if there's food, that means there likely needs to be someone, and again in a church of thousands, I'm going to assume someone's, multiple people, who are involved in helping and cooking and those sorts of things. And for some reason, I can't see Peter throwing on an apron. Right? We've talked about Peter, giant bonehead. I have a hard time seeing him cooking for, in fact, you know what, I could possibly see him trying to cook for somebody, and somebody else saying, oh no, I got that deer. They jumped in and helped out. This was something that people who were able and passionate about stepped up and did because this ministry needed done. Luke concludes this particular passage with one that we have pointed out, that we will continue to point out, and that we need to point out. In verse 47, every day the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. This is amazing. It's inspiring. I'll go so far as to say it's uplifting. It's one amazing way to close out this picture of a church united. But let me ask you this question. How did these new people find them? Again, this is a church on the move. Right? There's no building with the sign outside that says First Church. If they had that, they'd be the only ones who could say that honestly. There's a lot of first churches out there, but I don't think they were the first church. They met mobile. Sure, there were probably some people who heard about this particular church and heard these different stories, and they thought, you know what, I got to find these folks. And so they sought them out. They hunted them down. But I'm going to guess a lot more of them found out where this church was because somebody told them. That means that some member of this church shared with them where they're going to be meeting today. Some member of this church told them about Jesus, shared a little bit of their faith with them, and said, you know what, if you want to know more, I know where we can go. People stepping up and inviting people. They told their friends, their neighbors, their coworkers, their family members, anybody and everybody that they possibly could about who Jesus is. and then invited them to come and see. This means that they took the mission of Jesus, the great commission that he laid out to go and make disciples, they took this very literally. They took it seriously, and they made this happen. I don't think it's by accident that Luke uses words like they, or everybody, or all. Luke is a good writer. I don't think he picks those particular words flippantly. I genuinely believe that Luke uses this particular kind of language in this particular text to show us the shared element of their unity together. They all worked together, doing whatever they could in service to those around them. They weren't all teachers. They weren't all worship leaders. They weren't all fill in the blank. But each one had a role. Each one had a place where they could use their skills and their tools and their interests in service to what this church's mission was. Some roles may have seemed as more important than others, but they're not. Because with everybody working together, they created something incredible. The shared unity that they had with everybody being plugged in and active in what was going on, it created a picture of something so beautiful that it continues to have impact today. We're still talking about this 2,000 years later. Because this picture is so powerful and so moving of what a church can accomplish when it is truly united in every meaning of the word. Each person knew what their role was. They knew where they fit in. They knew how they could help and how they could serve. Again, no role was more important than another. You could have the apostles giving great, phenomenal sermons, engaging and in-depth and rich in Scripture. But if nobody's offering their home, who are they going to talk to? You could have these people gathering together as much as you want to, but if nobody's feeding them, eventually they're going to have to break up. I don't know about you, but when that clock starts hitting 11:30, I'm thinking about lunch. Maybe not today because it's like 10:30 now, but you know. But everybody is plugged in some way, shape, or form. The Apostle Paul discusses the need for the members of the church to fill whatever role that they need to as an act of ministry. And he paints this absolutely incredible picture. It's something I know you've probably heard before, and it is a lengthy text, but we're going to go through all of it because I think there's something beautiful about it. He says in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 12 through 27, he says, "For just as the body is one and has many parts, and all the parts of the body, though many, are one body, so also is Christ. For we were baptized by one Spirit into one body, whether Jew or Greek, whether slave or free. And we were all given one Spirit to drink. Indeed, the body is not one, but many parts. If the foot should say, 'Because I am not a hand, I don't belong to the body,' it is not for that reason any less a part of the body. And if the ear should say, 'Because I'm not an eye, I don't belong to the body,' it is not for any reason any less a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be?" I love that picture that he paints there. That's fantastic. If the whole body were an eye, that'd be creepy. If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But as it is, God has arranged each one of the parts in the body just as he wanted. If they were all the same part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, but one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, "I don't need you." Again, the head cannot say to the feet, "I don't need you." On the contrary, those parts of the body that are weaker are indispensable. And those parts of the body that we consider less honorable, we clothe with greater honor. Our unrespectable parts are treated with greater respect, which our respectable parts do not need. Instead, God has put the body together, giving greater honor to the less honorable, so that there would be no division in the body, but that the members would have the same concern for each other. So if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. If one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. Now you are the body of Christ and the individual members of it. The thing about the body, I don't think I'm going to teach you anything here that you don't already know, but the thing about the body is if one part stops working for one reason or another, it means that the other parts of the body have to try to compensate in some way. That the other parts of the body have to work even harder because one part is not doing its role. But the body is at its healthiest when all the individual parts of that body are fulfilling the role that they're meant to fulfill. So it is with the church. God has designed you with different gifts and interests and abilities than He has me. For some of you in this room, if I were to ask you to come up here and give the sermon, you probably wish that in that moment you would just drop dead. That's not your role. And that's okay. That's not what God designed you to be, but God did give you a gift and ability that He meant for you to use in service to His church so that it could accomplish His mission and His vision of what the church should be. Because when the body has every single part of it working and active and moving and doing what it's supposed to do, the body is healthy. Healthy things grow. So if we're here and we're not plugged in and we're not involved in a role, if we're not doing something, if we're not involved, we're not robbing God of anything. You can't rob God of anything. But you're robbing yourself. You're robbing yourself of reaching your full potential. You're robbing yourself of doing something that God made you to do. You're no more fulfilled than when you're doing the thing that God has designed you to do. But not only that, you're also, and believe me, folks, I tried to find a nicer way to put this. I really did. Trying to find a softer way to make this statement. I can't find one. But you're also hindering the mission and the growth of the church. I'm sorry, I hope we can still be friends after I said that. It shouldn't be surprising that the church in America is experiencing people leaving in droves when its people are not engaged in what's going on. As a member of church leadership, I've got to take responsibility for this myself too, because I've not done the best job of getting you plugged in where you should be. I've not done that right little whisper of, hey, maybe you need to be over here. Hey, could you help us out over here? And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the ways that I've not engaged you. I'm sorry for the ways that I've not helped you find that spot where you plug in. But I want to challenge you. I want to push you. Take the initiative. You know your strengths and your interests and your abilities far better than I do. So if you see a spot that exists within the ministries of this church, the things that we're trying to accomplish, if you see a spot and you think, you know what, that might be my spot, go try it. Because you're probably right. Or if you've run down the list of all the ministries that the church has done and you're not really sure where you fit in there, try them all. Something's bound to stick. If you've done that, if you've run through that list and you've tried every single thing and you still don't feel like, no, it's just not fitting, then sit down with a piece of paper and a pencil. Write out what you can do, and then ask yourself, how can you use it for ministry? How can you use what your abilities are to further the kingdom of God? There are so many incredible missions and ministries that have been started simply because somebody said, you know what, I can do this, I can't do that, so I'm going to do this. Missions that are changing the world got started because somebody saw a need and knew that they could reach it. They knew that they had the ability to fit that need. And so they plugged in. And the thing about that is most of those folks, at least the ones that I've heard, I've never heard any of them say, I regret it, or I shouldn't have done this, or this was a bad idea. Nah, those folks are the most fulfilled, the most excited, the most passionate, not just about their faith, but about what they're doing. Because they found their spot where they can plug in, get active, and fulfill the mission of the church. It's hard. I'm not going to lie to you. Unity is hard. Maintaining church unity takes work. It just does. But I've learned in my life, and hopefully you've learned this too, the things that are most worth doing in your life are the things you got to work the hardest for. I love my wife. I love the marriage that we've built together. I love the life that we have together, but it's taken a lot of work. Mandy takes a lot of effort. But I consider it worth the work. I love what I do here. Oh, but it takes a lot of work. But I wouldn't change it. Unity takes work, but it's work that's worthwhile. Unity is so important to the heart of God. If you've heard nothing else I've said over the last 5 weeks as we've gone through this series, hear that. Unity is so important to the heart of God. It mattered so much to Jesus, like we said weeks ago, that Jesus, as he was getting ready to go to the cross, the last thing he prayed for was for our unity, was for us to be together and united, because he understood that if his church and his followers are united together, they're unstoppable. That nothing can get in the way of his gospel being spread to those who need it most. Unity takes work from all, but it is so worthwhile. Again, you don't have the same role as I have. Unity is not uniformity. Unity does not mean that you have to look, act, and dress like me. That'd be weird if y'all did. I wouldn't want to be at church next Sunday if y'all did. Each one of us has been specifically gifted and blessed by God with different abilities and different interests to be used in unifying the church so that the gospel of Jesus can continue to spread where it's needed most. It takes courage. Unity takes all kinds of unwavering vision to stay focused on the spreading of the gospel of Jesus. It takes sacrifice on our behalf to put people above our possessions. It takes courage to seek to resolve our conflicts. It takes each one of us fulfilling the role that God has in store for us so that we can see the body of Christ grow in a healthy way. Unity takes work, but it is work that is worthwhile. Let's press hard and let's work for our unity. As we close out our time together, I want to read the words of David in Psalm chapter 133. We're going to read the whole chapter. It's 3 verses. I think you'll be fine. It says, "How delightfully good when brothers live together in harmony. It is like fine oil on the head, running down on the beard, running down onto Aaron's beard, onto his robes. It is like the dew of Hermon falling on the mountains of Zion. For there the Lord has appointed his blessing, life forevermore."